Hey everyone, this is Eddie Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another edition of SportsSpeak Live powered by SeatGeek. Use that promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word, $20 off your first purchase at checkout. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Well, we are in the middle of the summer, which means the four professional sports, baseball just had its all-star game, the home run derby, a terrible national anthem, all of that. They're about to start their second half. Next episode, we'll be diving full scale into the Major League Baseball trade deadline and starting to look ahead because NFL teams will be reporting to training camp. But this is kind of a light episode today. We're going to be talking about the Olympics a little bit. We're going to be talking about the release of EA Sports College Football 25. Tim has his Tim's Tiers, which is kind of related to that topic. But before we do that, I had a chance to talk to our good friend Johnny Vasquez this week about the world of soccer because Euros, Copa America, they just happened, and the United States doesn't have a coach, and we're 2 years away from them hosting the World Cup. So let's hear some of that conversation. Here on SportsSpeak Live, powered by SeatGeek. Eddie Kalegi here with you. Well, there's not a lot happening in the four major sports right now. Baseball coming out of the All-Star break, NBA, kind of a lackluster free agency. NFL training camp doesn't start till next week. But one sport that has been full of news is the world of soccer because the Euros, Copa America, both happening this summer. The Olympics are on the way too, and everybody's looking ahead to that 2026 World Cup, which the United States will be hosting, but right now are without a coach. Joining us now, he hosts Soccer Stories Today. Johnny Vasquez. Johnny, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And yeah, I mean, with this past Euros, this past Copa America, a lot of news, but definitely the main story is the firing of Gregg Berhalter.
Yes, and we will touch on that, but I want to first just hash out the two tournaments. We'll start with the Euros because Spain was obviously the best team in this tournament from the beginning. Nobody really thought they were the number one team. There you go, representing. Nobody thought they were the best team. Everybody thought it was between England and France, particularly France. But Mbappe gets hurt in that first game, and France just really didn't look like themselves the whole tournament. Didn't have a goal in open play in all of the group stage. And England got to the championship, but frankly got bailed out by Jude Bellingham and having a really easy draw in the knockout stage. Spain played great soccer. They had many scores. They're a young team. They got Yamal, who's only 17. Nico Williams is really talented as well. Your thoughts on how Spain carved through and what England and France should be thinking about? I mean, France keeps Deschamps, but England now is going to be looking for a coach too.
Yeah, just starting off with France, I'm going to start with France and England first of all. I mean, France, it was obviously very disappointing. We saw nothing from Mbappe, and honestly, the rest of the team was very lackluster. It was one of the poorest spells of form that I've seen from Griezmann as well. Just wasn't creating anything. And like you mentioned, just no creativity. You saw Theo Hernandez and Koundé going up the wings, but providing no crosses. Dembele started, and then they took him out, and then he was coming back again. Thuram also and Muani just Deschamps just continuing to change them, but nothing was working. Definitely a tournament to forget. Obviously, Mbappe with the broken nose obviously was not just up to par with the speed of play, and just nothing was going for them. So I was honestly surprised that they even got that far due to the lack of scoring that they had. But a team like that is kind of why they are champions in some ways, because it's teams like that, they're going to find a way to win no matter what. So they kind of prevailed to a certain extent, but it was definitely a failure on the side of France. With England, I mean, there's just on paper no better side than England. They got one of the best strikers in the world. You got Jude Bellingham, who's got shots for the Ballon d'Or. Around them, you've got Foden, you've got Saka. You have too much talent. And with that squad, obviously, like you mentioned, they had the easier side of the draw, so that definitely was in favor for them. So it was no surprise that they got to the final. There's definitely some tougher teams on that side of the bracket, but the final was honestly the bare minimum for the team, especially with who they were drawn up against. But again, it was just a little bit lackluster from the team. Harry Kane was not being Harry Kane, not scoring. He just wasn't himself. Jude Bellingham obviously scored that amazing bicycle kick, but other than that, he was just a little bit. He wasn't playing to that Real Madrid level. and just the whole team. There's just so many questions. Saka playing the right wing, and then he comes to the left back. Kobe Mainu, who's one of my favorite players at this current moment, he comes in later on in the team alongside Declan Rice, who's been a little bit poor. And then finally Spain. I mean, they played lights out. I mean, obviously, the best team won the tournament, and that was Spain. Yamal, Nico, that duo was just creating mayhem. Someone like Alvaro Morata, who I think is honestly so poor, to see him be a Euro champion. I don't know how the world of soccer works, but hey, you see new things every day. And then that midfield, I mean, the whole team, it's just so well structured with Rodri, Fabian, Dani Olmo, who I think honestly played a better tournament than Pedri would have played. Carvajal, another player who's getting shouts for the Ballon d'Or as a right back, which is honestly crazy. So the best team won the tournament. They played lights out. They were dominant. They scored amazing goals. Yamal was super impressive. I mean, you could talk about them all day.
Now, before we get to Copa, I see the jersey behind you, so we got to discuss Cristiano Ronaldo here. So, Berto Martinez had to
Oof.
play a lot and be not just a player, but the focal point of the Portugal attack pretty much through the tournament. They lose in the quarters, and Ronaldo, frankly, didn't look very good. 39 years old. He's still got some in the tank, but, this might have been the end for Cristiano Ronaldo. And as we look ahead to the World Cup, Portugal has young talent. So, do you think Ronaldo, what kind of role does he deserve heading into 2026, if any?
I mean, Ronaldo's a guy who's knowing him and just his ego, his mannerisms, his way of going about it. He's gonna want to play the World Cup because he definitely still thinks it's about him. And Roberto Martinez definitely obviously made the mistake of continuing to play him when you have young talent like Gonzalo Ramos, the striker, playing at a top level. You got players around him who, I mean, you could just see when Ronaldo was playing, he just didn't have that quick step that he usually had. He'd go up for those headers. He'd just be a second too late. And obviously, I mean, he's 39. You can't expect him to be the same player as he was before. But he definitely cannot be a starter if he does play this World Cup. And quite frankly, he just has to kind of come to terms with the fact that he's not the star of the team anymore, and it's other players. I mean, the team, another team on paper that looks incredible. You got Bernardo Silva, you got Vitinha, who's been one of the best midfielders in the world at the moment, Rafael Leao, and you have so much talent, and for Ronaldo to just kind of make it about him. Obviously, he is a goal scorer, he's the top goal scorer ever, but it's a little bit that kind of was contradicting Roberto Martinez's way of play. And even if you take him off and he complains, you're the head coach of the team, and you got to make those decisions for the better of the team and not the better of one player.
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly. So we'll see where they go from here. Spain, of course, in a great position heading into 2026. England and France and Portugal all going to be looking to bounce back. Now let's head to Copas. Before we talk about the United States, pretty embarrassing exit, let's talk about the teams that this was all about. Argentina, who goes back to back in Copa America. And this is the disparity, I think, between Argentina and Portugal. Lionel Messi is still on that Argentine team, but even though he didn't have the best tournament, they had other players that stepped up around him, and he got hurt in the final, which was sad to see, but the rest of the roster stepped up and ultimately got the game winner against Colombia. I know you're a little disappointed about that, but I mean, that Colombian team was strong. Uruguay with Marcelo Bielsa was impressive too. And how about Jesse Marsh's group with Canada steps in there, gets them to the semifinal. So your takeaways from this year's Copa from the competitive team side.
Yeah, no, it was honestly, I personally thought it was a lot more fun to watch because when you watch the Copa, it's just these teams brawling out. Best game I saw was definitely that Colombia versus Uruguay game where that last 15, 20 minutes was just two teams fouling. They were just scrappy. It was mayhem. But that's what the Copa is about. It's not as organized as the Euros, but you get a different feel to it. But yeah, that final, it was coming from a Colombian, it's obviously a little bit it hurt a little bit, but they definitely had their chances. Davinson Sanchez, who played a great tournament, had a header. We saw Cordoba with an early chance where he just hit it left of the post. James Rodriguez, obviously you can't talk about this Colombia team without talking about James Rodriguez and the stellar performance that he had turning 33 on July 12th, and just he played lights out. Luis Diaz, wasn't scoring as much as they'd like him, but I mean the whole team played incredible. They were coming off of a 28 game unbeaten run. The 29th game, it's funny because their loss prior to that spell was against Argentina, and they ended up losing against Argentina. Um, and there was obviously a team like you mentioned, a team like Canada, who got to the semis and honestly put up a good fight against Argentina, the world champions. Jesse March has some incredible talent on that team, and he was able to really sustain them against an Argentina team who had, with all due respect, an easier side of the draw and just the entire tournament. They didn't go up against the likes of Brazil, a Uruguay, a Colombia early in the tournament. Uruguay, another team, very well put together. They were honestly one of the favorites alongside Argentina to go all the way. You can't talk about the Copa without talking about Brazil, and they were just a very poor, obviously with the likes of Vinicius, Rodrigo. I mean, they got extremely talented players, but they just didn't click. And then Argentina, yeah, I mean, Messi, he's also getting up there in age. He didn't really have much of a tournament, but he had his good friend Lautaro Martinez, who definitely stepped up with 5 goals in the tournament at crucial points. It wasn't even starting and was the top goal scorer and had that goal in the 115th, 16th minute against Colombia to seal the deal. Just coming off of injury, he's going to be out for a little bit for Inter Miami as well. But that is what that's a world champion team. It's other players stepping up. Di Maria stepping up. He's playing his last international game as well. Julian Alvarez, a solid midfield, and solid back line as well. Romero is honestly lights out. As physical as he is, he has this defensive presence. And Dibu Martinez, don't like the guy whatsoever. His antics, his personality, but man, that he you just can't get past him. They had most clean sheets in the tournament, had incredible penalty saves. I mean, they're just a very well put together team. Everyone plays in Europe in some capacity. Everyone's playing at a high level. And even with the absence of Messi going forward, um, if he does play the next World Cup, which I honestly doubt, they still have a solid team to go far.
Yeah, they definitely do. And like you said, this injury with Messi, 37 years old, don't know how well he's going to heal back from it. If he's at 100%, great. If not, Argentina's got a squad still that can compete for a World Cup title in 2026. But that World Cup's going to be taking place in the same place Copa America was, the United States. And the host nation knows they're in the tournament in 26. They don't know, however, who their coach is going to be. So Gregg Berhalter, who had the scandal after the 2022 World Cup with Gio Reyna, they get rid of him. 6-month coaching search with 2 interims. And what do they decide? They bring him back again. And, almost inevitable. Copa America, they get an easy draw. And I feel like there were a lot of American fans that when they saw this, they just knew something could potentially go wrong here. The Bolivia game, you only win 2-0, and Bolivia was the worst team in the tournament. They should have scored more against them. And then Tim Weah's red card, Panama, you somehow lose to Panama 2-1, and it makes a Uruguay game, which you were hoping you win the first 2. That one's really meaningless, made you have to try to win the Uruguay game, and they couldn't, and Gregg Berhalter is out. Now, to me, the worst thing with Berhalter was during that game when Bolivia equalized and it was 1-1, and then he's giving the 1-1 signal to the players, and then US concedes a goal 30 seconds later. Like, this was coming. They needed to make the pivot, but they should have made the pivot 2 years ago, because now you're going to be doing a coaching search, and knowing the US, it's going to take a long time. You got to get ready for this World Cup in 2026. And now you're sort of just wasting time that you could be using to get ready for this tournament, because in 2022, it was a pretty good showing in the World Cup. You made it to the knockout stage. Now you're not doing any development towards 2026 because you don't have a coach right now.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned was, I mean, it's just putting up 1-1. I mean, you got to go into win the game. That is the mentality of someone who's scared. That's not the mentality of a coach who's going to lead a team to a title of any sort of capacity. I mean, Berhalter, yeah, he's won some gold cups, but there's just no competition there. You see, when the CONCACAF goes up against the South American teams, they're going to struggle because of the level of talent. But when you look on paper at this team, you have talented players, and Berhalter just didn't know what to do with it. He made very poor substitutes. Just his whole system of play was poor. I mean, just very disappointing. And now there's this sense of urgency because it's not a lot of time before this World Cup. And like you said, they had a very, very impressive performance in the previous World Cup, going up against the Netherlands team who played very well, who went up again also against the world champions in Argentina, took them to penalties. He played very well against this Netherlands team. Now you're going into this next World Cup where all your players are going to be in their prime. This is a crucial moment for this US team because I don't think we're going to see a team with this much talent all in their primes at around the same time, 27 through 30 years old, all around the same time. Obviously, there were shots about Jurgen Klopp being the manager. I doubt that's going to happen. I don't think Jurgen Klopp would ever want to put himself in the mess that is this U.S. national team. Shots about Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira. I'd love to see Mauricio Pochettino, former former coach of Spurs, of PSG, someone like him, I think could honestly really help this team out. But I mean, it's just a very, very difficult time as a US fan. And whoever the next coach is going to be faced with an immense pressure because this tournament is honestly the one with the most expectations. Being at home, again, being all in their prime. Whoever steps up is going to have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, they will. They certainly will. And, I kind of want to get your take here too, because you know more soccer than me. And a lot of American fans, they're just like, why can't the US compete? And they're like, oh, these players are so good. How really good is the US roster compared to these teams? I mean, these guys, they do play for European clubs, but a point that I've heard a lot of people make, and I want to know what you think here. Back in the day when the US team was at its height, which was in the 1990s, you know, like the US was able to compete largely because a lot of their players stayed here and they played in the MLS. I'm certainly not saying the MLS is a better league, but when they're in the MLS, they're number one, number two players on their roster. They're knowing what it takes to lead a team. If they're in the EPL as essentially a bench warmer on a team or playing in La Liga as a bench warmer on a team, how much are they really learning being a depth piece in Europe, which is a better league, versus being a standout in the MLS? Obviously, the European competition prepares you better for the World Cup, I'd say, than the MLS. But where do you fall in that discussion, and how good really is the roster that this new coach is going to be dealing with for 26?
No, I absolutely believe that they have a solid roster. Like people miss obviously Christian Pulisic. People think he's like one of the best players in the world. Yeah, he's not one of the best players in the world, but currently he is the best player on this U.S. men's national team. And I do believe with his time at AC Milan, he's really found his form once again. However, you look at the rest of the roster, and when you have a starter like Giovanni Reina, who goes to Nottingham Forest, who barely plays, and then you think he's going to be like your golden child of a player, that's not going to be the case. That's not going to be the case whatsoever. You definitely have some solid players. Tim Weah, Weston McKennie, has a lot of experience in Europe. So you have little pieces, but now you need a coach to put these pieces together. And when you have these pieces, like you said, a big thing is leading the team. None of these players are leading the team. They're either coming off the bench, fighting for their spot. Maybe Pulisic is the only one who really has a solidified spot on his respective team with AC Milan. But a lot of that also has to do with the development of the US and in terms of when they're much younger. A lot of that has to do with these, the system that they have in other European countries. It's a lot of club plays. You're playing for academies and stuff. Here, it's a lot. You have to pay for these academies, and you have to somehow find your way and build your way up just to go to a college. Like they don't do that stuff in Europe. Like you're playing the academy. That's the number one thing. It's not like you're gonna go you're going to go to Rutgers or something and then go to a higher level. So there's definitely a difference in systems in that respective proportion. But I do genuinely believe that they can compete against the likes of these very good teams, such as Netherlands, such as Argentina, such as France. They have the talent to compete because I mean a lot of these players are competing with some of the best players in the world. But now with the pressure, again, these players are all going to be in their primes, and now you got to find a way to click it together, and this is the moment to do so because the US has been waiting for a moment for so long, and recently these past maybe this past decade is when you kind of see that kind of slowly going up, but it just always falls back down and we go to square one.
And that's the thing. Soccer as a game is growing in the United States. It's only going to go to the next level when the American national team is holding its end of the bargain. The women's team has done that, the men's not so much, and now the pressure's on heading into 2026. Johnny Vasquez, Johnny, thanks for joining us here on Sports Speak Live. Really appreciate it. Well, thank you again to Johnny Vasquez for joining us and for that insight on the soccer world. It's going to be really big here in 2 years when the World Cup is here. It was a big deal in '94. It's going to be even bigger now that soccer has become more popular and more mainstream in the United States. But America just needs to get a good team. Please, please, please. They've got the assets to do it. They just need a competitive team in this World Cup. But speaking of American sports, Tim, the Olympics now rolling around next week in Paris. Last Summer Olympics were kind of weird because it was still during the whole COVID scenario. So now we get full-on regular Olympics. What are some things that you're excited for? I'll start it off with a couple of mine. I'm really excited to see what the U.S. basketball team can do. I love the roster this time around. I'm so glad that the Stars have now realized that Paul George's injury was a bit of a fluke. And it's not that you can't play in any sort of international competition, because that's kind of what it felt like for the better part of 10 years. But now we see players actually brave enough to come back, and we're going to see a representative U.S. basketball team with LeBron, with Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid. I mean, it is a loaded roster for the United States this time around, but it's not going to be easy. Canada's got a good team with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and R.J. Barrett. Obviously, Luka, Slovenia, Nikola Jokic in Serbia, Giannis in Greece. Those are probably the three best players in the world of basketball right now. Giannis, Luka, and Jokic. None of them play for America. We'll see how far they can carry their respective teams. So that should be fun. And I just enjoy getting into the Olympics for a couple of weeks every year. You see sports that you'll never see otherwise. As a racing fan, I love seeing Lee Diffie calling track and field. Equestrian. When on earth would I ever put on equestrian and go out of my way to watch it? But if it's there as part of Olympics coverage, I'll put that on. And the last thing I'll say before I go to you, Tim, Scott Hansen is involved in the Olympics this year. When they're doing the red zone, but they're calling it the gold zone, I am definitely going to check that out. So overall, high expectations, looking forward to a fun Olympics this year.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the Scott Hansen Gold Zone segments and so on. I think that's going to be very, very exciting. And to be honest with you, you kind of hit on the head. What I think I'm really excited for to see is men's basketball, just because of the fact that you think about just how disastrous the Olympics was a few seasons ago, or for a few years ago to this point for America. And the fact of the matter of now, every year, well, I shouldn't say every year, but almost every Olympic, it feels like we talked about the dream team, right? It's disputable that this could be one of the greatest rosters America has ever assembled, because you have some of the best basketball players in the world. But again, it comes to adapting. And to be honest with you, it has to go at the forefront, right? We're not in the NBA season anymore and everything. We just went through a very, very long season where the Boston Celtics become a champion, which was expected. But even with this roster, it's not expected exactly fully, right, for the U.S. to fully be the favorite, because there's always surprises in the Olympics. And my thing is this: I'm excited to see if there's going to be adaptability and so on, if they can adjust to the harder style of play. I can only imagine LeBron trying to flop 1,000 times and not getting a
That's
foul.
the thing. I want to say, I was watching one of the FIBA qualifiers. It wasn't as much LeBron, it was Embiid. Embiid's throwing himself all over the floor and he's not getting the whistles because they ref a game like you should ref a basketball game. So they do have to acclimate to that.
Yeah, and it's like, so that's what makes me excited, because it's a totally different style of basketball than the NBA is saying. And again, I'm not saying the NBA is soft. We talked about this on multiple episodes, but you would like to see it eventually adapt to what we see around the world in regards to rules and regulations. But it is kind of like, I haven't been the fully biggest person on the Olympics right over the years, but it always blows my mind to go see all those crazy sports. Like you mentioned, like ping pong. Who the heck watches ping pong? But we're watching it during the Olympics, rowing and so on and everything. It's so great. Obviously, well, of late, I haven't been as much into swimming, but of course, I mean, who wasn't into swimming back then, when you were younger, first watching the Olympics. So to me, I'm excited to see what happens. I hope America brings back the most golds. If it doesn't, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, I mean, basketball by far for me is going to be the one to watch. To be honest with you, baseball, the last Olympics was very intriguing for me just because of the scenario that it's in. I still feel the World Baseball Classic is the Olympics of whatever, because that's where the superstars do play and represent their country. Um, but overall, basketball has to be the one to watch. And by the way, too, not to shift away from the Olympics, but did you know at the American Dream Mall yesterday?
Oh yeah, Arena Bowl 33. I was watching some of that. A football team from Billings, Montana is playing in the middle of the mall. They got the announcers set up in the freaking food
I
court.
was like, Mimicry sent that to me yesterday. I'm like, what date is it? I want to get media access to that. That looks like a lot of fun. And then I started getting worried. I'm like, are they going to put it on like the top 4? Imagine if somebody gets hit over a railing. Like,
I was watching it yesterday. It was insane. A guy makes the catch and he's like 10 feet away from a baby's RS. It's like,
what is going? Who had the idea for that?
they had the commissioner on the broadcast and he just seemed very disgruntled the whole time. He was like, well, this wasn't our first choice, but we've made it work. That, first of all, that's not a very endearing message to the fans of your sport, where your championship game, you have your commissioner on at halftime and you're saying that your venue is not your first choice.
I thought they went bankrupt. Didn't they go bankrupt? Like,
they did go bankrupt and they somehow kept somewhat afloat, which I don't understand how it did go bankrupt, because I feel like arena football is a pretty compelling sport because it's really different from anything else you'd watch. I mean, I've seen some arena games. There was an arena team in my town for a couple of years and I went to that, and it's cool. It's different. It's exciting.
They need arena football in the Olympics.
They do.
I mean, it's remarkable. But, it's that too, where it's just like arena football is so different. It's so out there. Of course, who doesn't love the good old hefty lefty? Of course, God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore. But I mean, there's some iconic people that you've seen play in the AFL. And the fact that he was here in New Jersey and I had no idea about it until the day of irritates me, because I would love to go see that. Just with how chaotic that would have been. But the reason why too, I think maybe that's not the number one option. How much do you want to bet they were pushing for Dallas? In going into, what is it, America's Mall or the American Dream Mall?
I mean, I'd assume he was pushing to at least play in like a stadium before this instead of a mall.
Yeah, but it's arena football. Who would play? Well, I guess
an arena. An arena's indoors. But anyway, again, we're both in the New Jersey area. Neither of us heard anything about this until like Barstool posts a clip where the opening kickoff like is almost hitting the third floor balcony, and maybe that's part of the reason they went bankrupt, because they didn't promote their product well enough, because nobody knew that they were doing this. But anyway, that was a wild tangent we ended up on. But 2 other things I wanted to hit on in the Olympics. You mentioned swimming. Swimming is really compelling. Katie Ledecky might be the best U.S. athlete right now, period, because of all the records she's been able to break. Men's swimming, it doesn't have the storylines of Michael Phelps or Ryan Lochte faking his own arrest anymore, but you never know. There's a lot of talent there. And the other thing I really got into in the last Olympics was the 3-on-3 basketball, because it's like playing a 21. It's basically street ball. Jimmer Fredette is playing for the United States this year. Keisei Tamanaga played for Japan last time. That's just like really odd and really fun. And to think that that's now a competitive Olympic sport too. And I think this is the first Olympics breakdancing is an Olympic sport too. So I'll probably check it out.
Didn't know that.
Yes.
I have to tune into now as well. That's very interesting.
Yeah, but the Olympics start next week. Again, we'll probably touch on it a little more later in the summer, but since we don't have an episode next week, we figured we might as well touch on it now before the opening ceremonies in Paris a week from today. But let's transition to the other big news in the sports world this week, in the virtual world. And we talked about it when they officially announced the release date a few months ago, when EA Sports College Football 25 was officially coming out. And before we even get to the quality of the game, I've said this before and I'll say it again. This is a monumental moment for college athletics in its history, period. Because with the way things had gone with NIL, and we didn't know if this game was ever going to come back, and how the landscape has completely shifted in these last few years, and players have taken on their own autonomy and they want to be compensated for what they do at the college level, it seemed like it was maybe completely infeasible for them to someday get this video game back, but they do it. And now every single college player is getting some sort of compensation for their likeness being in the game, which is a massive step. And even if you're not someone who plays video games, you have to appreciate this, that at the very least, however you feel about the NIL debate one way or another, we are seeing tangible change where players are actually getting compensated for their likeness within a video game. Because, you know, if you have a problem with players getting the house thrown at them to go play at a school for a year, that's one thing. But when they're getting used, you know, completely copyright, just getting their likenesses shown on a game, it's problematic when they're not getting anything for it. And that's how it was for 10 years when they first had the first iteration of this game. So to see it change like this is big. But the other story is just how good the game actually is, because Tim, I know you haven't. I know you started a Rutgers dynasty with me as the coach or something.
Yes, Edward Legward is the Rutgers coach. And by the way, I've been playing on Heisman difficulty, but we're about 5-0 to start the year. We're actually top 10 in the country almost already.
Let's
A
go.
couple wins against Nebraska and so on. And I recruited some crazy 6'4" receiver that has 100 speed. That's the other thing. So you're talking about somebody who's played in Madden leagues over the year or whatever. It blows my mind because to be honest with you, I didn't watch a lot of the NCAA hype up and so on because I wanted my expectations to be set when I get the copy of the game, not what others are saying. And also it's the fact too of EA's history, right? You get the game early. It doesn't come to full features. I want to see when I have the game when I get it. And thanks to Drew, of course, because I game share with him. So that also helped as well to allow me to get it early. But overall, I mean, even if you're not an avid video game enjoyer like I am, or I love sports games, I love competition. It's a big reason why I love racing as well. But my thing is, you don't even have to enjoy playing football or understand how to play football to do Dynasty or all these other things. I mean, the idea that there are hundreds of schools and that you can build a recruitment system, be a leader, be a coordinator, do whatever you want to do. It is what I missed about the creativeness VA, but it is what makes it so enjoyable. I mean, even granted, we read Pocono last week. Have you seen what Icyvert's been tweeting? My man's making up storylines for content on Twitter through NCAA, and it has nothing to do with it. And he's doing it with Temple, you know, so there's a lot that you can do with it. Wrote CFP online. I love, like I said, that head-to-head stuff. I'm going to be my first comp dynasty league that's starting up very soon. But overall, I mean, it's a lot of fun. I will say, to be honest with you, the one downfall, it plays like a slower Madden. There's a lot of features that are Madden, but they did a good job, I think, with the working on the college throwing. To be honest with you, the new Madden passing system that's been developed over the last few years kind of fits well with the college. And it plays a lot slower and stiffer, makes it a little bit harder to tackle, but really that's what college is. You know, you don't have the best athletes in the world, and they worked on some animations and stuff. So to this point, outside of me screaming my lungs off at times when things don't go my way, I've had a lot of fun with the game, and it's definitely an all-timer. I think, to be honest with you, I think there's going to be more people playing this game than when Madden releases, and we'll be playing Madden over the next few months.
I saw something the first day it was out, and mind you, this was a Monday afternoon, that just on, I believe, the PlayStation side, they had 555,000 players playing online. So that doesn't even count people that are playing offline, which is probably about the same number. That doesn't count Xbox. And that was just the pre-release, because there was the early edition that you mentioned that you could get 3 days early. So this was only amongst the people who paid for that to get access 3 days before the rest. And they still had over 500,000 players online on one of the two consoles at one time on a Monday afternoon. So EA gets a lot of flack, and a lot of it is deserved, but they did a very good job with the execution of this game, and they're certainly being rewarded for it. But now my question to you, Tim. You play a lot of video games, as you said. You've seen a lot. What do you consider to be your top 5 sports video games of all time? It's time for Tim's Tiers. Let's do it.
Indeed, Tim's Tears is back, and let's start with number 5. This one may be a surprise to you, Eddie, but I'm going with backyard baseball. Who doesn't remember getting on the computer, playing with Pablo Sanchez, Keisha Phillips, and all the backyard gang? I didn't really like the combination with MLB as those years developed, but the original one was so much fun and something I love to go back from time to time. At number 4, we're going to get into a little bit of a rivalry here. It was Madden, NFL 2005, and also NFL 2K5. That was when the rivalry was peak. That was one of the last 2K NFL games. But man, oh man, 2 great releases. Ray Lewis being on the cover of Madden NFL 05. You could not ask for a better race for who has the better game than that. Number 3, I'm going with Wii Sports. Who hasn't played Wii Sports? I mean, come on now. And between boxing, bowling, whatever, everybody wanted to get to that pro rating. You played with your friends for bragging rights when it came out. I love me some Wii Sports. Now, this is where my list is going to really start getting controversial, to be honest with you, Eddie. Because number 2, the more I looked back at it after listing yesterday, MLB 2K10 through 13 is on my number 2. The perfect game challenge. It's the nostalgia as a kid going out there. Turns out everybody that did it cheated over the years. It is what it is. But I remember turning on my Xbox 360, wanting to be one of those first people to throw a perfect game. The music was great. It made it so much fun to play. And by far a game that I wish still existed. But unfortunately, there was a lot of bugs with it. And the last one, number 1, you may agree with me on this. The fans may not, but it is NASCAR Thunder 2004. I mean, there is no better game to go back to. Best career mode, best creativeness, best lightning challenges. NASCAR 2003 was great with Dale Jr. on the cover, but 2004 was on another level. By far one of my favorite NASCAR games to ever go back and play, and by far an all-time favorite.
Yeah, I agree with you on almost everything that you just said. I loved MLB 2K13. I personally enjoy it more than MLB The Show. I think it played better. As you said, there were some bugs, there were some problems, but just the actual flow of the game, I enjoyed better. I liked the graphics better than MLB The Show had too. But I liked MLB 2K13 for sure. I agree with you. Like, to me, nostalgia-wise, Thunder 03 weighs a little more than 04, but you can't deny that 04 is the better game. I mean, 04's got the rivalry system as well. I think that's the perfect game because I feel like 05, then they strayed too much into the whole stupid hero and villain thing, and then it kind of went south after that. 04 was the perfect balance of elements of everything, and I agree with you, that's right up there. I'd also put NBA 2K13 in there. I know 2K's gotten ripped a bit over the last few years, but they were really good in the early 2010s with those games up until about 15, 16.
I would put NCAA 14 on there, but in all fairness of what we were talking about today, I wasn't going to put it on the top 5. And there's still potential. I mean, really, truthfully, NCAA 14 is on that top 5 for me. But if 25 surpasses it, only time will tell because again, we're only in the first week. We'll see. But I mean, it's such a good thing. Such a good thing to have it back. I'm so happy. And I don't even watch college football. That tells you if an avid person doesn't watch college football, enjoys it, anybody can enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. We're going to leave it at that. Again, thank you to Johnny Vasquez for joining us to chime in on some soccer. Going to take a week off next week. When we're back now, early the following week, right around August 1st, trade deadline. We'll have full reaction and NFL teams will be in training camp. So in August, we're going to be doing that thing where we've had some big debates over the last couple of years. We go through the Giants and Eagles schedules game by game, predict their records. It's going to be fun. So you're going to want to keep an eye out for that. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off of Sports Speak Live, episode 182. Enjoy the week, enjoy the start of the Olympics, and we'll talk to you in about a week and a half.